All right. We shall watch Mouthwashing and then we play Stray. Okay. For Mouthwashing though, I am going to turn off the alerts for now because I know that some people do not like the interruptions with some TTS while we're watching a video. So I'm going to turn it off for now, and then after I will turn it back on. Okay. We watch. Wait. Okay.
Mouthwashing is a psychological horror game following 5 crewmates aboard a Pony Express delivery.
Also, I want to do not a collab. I want to do a cosplay. I want to do a cosplay of Anya. I want to be Anya, guys. And I think my brother could do a good Daisuke cosplay. If my brother dyed his hair like a dirty brown, dirty blonde, I think he could do a good Daisuke cosplay.
Spacecraft, stuck together on day 147 of an over a year-long journey. While the game is presented, jumping back and forth through time over the course of 6 months, let's run through the entire story in true chronological order. This is Mouthwashing Explained.
Trying to get the volume right so I don't completely blow your ears out.
The moment in the game shows ship medic Anya completing a regularly scheduled psyche valve with Captain Curly. Curly reveals that he's had trouble sleeping recently, suggesting he's distracted by other thoughts. Anya says the last person she needs to evaluate is the co-pilot Jimmy, but she seems uncomfortable with the idea of interacting with him. She says
I feel like I should have noticed this at first. There was very early signs of Anya being uncomfortable around Jimmy and stuttering around him and not wanting to be near him. And I should have noticed this earlier, and I'm really sad that I didn't. And there was actually one scene. There's actually one scene with Curly and Anya where they're looking at the big screen in the living room area, and she noticed that there was a dead pixel on the screen, and she said that it's always in the back of her mind, and that was alluding to the fact of her sexual assault from Jimmy. She always had that in the back of her mind, and Curly had said that he's never really noticed a dead pixel and he always looks at the bigger picture, alluding to the fact that he just is always looking past the small details and trying to not think about the bad stuff.
Doesn't take the report seriously and previously reported developing a sexual interest in cartoon horses, such as the company's mascot Polly. To Anya's relief, Curly offers to do Jimmy's eval for her, given they are longtime associates and Curly had actually introduced Jimmy to the business. She then lets Curly know that ship engineer Swansea is looking for him, and makes a lighthearted joke about his angry note sounding like a fun time. On the way to the utility
all my homies hate Jimmy.
Curly briefly speaks with Jimmy, who reveals that the cheerful engineer intern, Daisuke, was a late addition to the ship, which explains why there's only 4 cryostasis pods inside the utility room, rather than the 5 needed to cover every crewmate.
That is so irresponsible, by the way, because Daisuke being a late addition member to the ship and them only have 4 cryopods, and so even if all of the cryopods had survived the crash, one of them would have died. One of them would have died no matter what if all of the cryopods had survived.
These could be used to keep the crew asleep for up to 20 years in case of an emergency. Curly finds Daisuke stuck in a wad of foam, which the ship auto-dispenses during emergencies in order to prevent holes from opening into space. Daisuke accidentally triggered it trying to climb into and repair a collapsed ventilation shaft. Senior Engineer Swansea admonishes Daisuke, then requests Curly uses Captain Pasco to unlock an axe and cut him out. Walking around the utility room, you can find many notes that Swansea has written for Daisuke, helping him learn the basics of ship repair.
What?
We see that despite his harsh attitude, Swansea is genuinely trying to mentor Dai, and also that Dai likes to doodle his notes, which is pretty cute. Curly retrieves the axe, cuts out Daisuke, and then leaves the axe with Swansea. This is an important lucky tool that will come back later. On the way to the cockpit, Curly falls into a metaphorical lake of red water.
Ooh.
Soon, broken ladders and warning signs appear as alarms begin blaring around him. He then walks towards what seems to be the sun. Everything goes white, excluding a single door leading into the cockpit. This disastrous scene foreshadows the upcoming collapse of Curly's position and his mental state regarding his life thus far.
I also saw a TikTok that, so you know how Curly got injured and he was all wrapped up in bandages and stuff, and it was one eye was covered. I think it was his right eye that was covered, so his left eye being uncovered symbolizes his view on Jimmy, on how he always saw the good in Jimmy, but what do you call Swansea, his left eye was covered, symbolizing him always viewing Jimmy as a bad person. And then Daisuke, both his eyes was covered when he died, symbolizing him being naive and not knowing either if like anyone was bad. He's just like kind of like a happy-go-lucky young man. And then Anya's eyes, they were both left untouched, and it symbolizes her seeing the truth in Jimmy, and that like he's always been a bad person to her.
Curly conducts Jimmy's psyche valve in the cockpit. Then they have a conversation where Jimmy reveals he likes the feeling of control he gets.
Me when I'm in an analyzing competition with a mouthwashing fan.
As a co-pilot, which is super not concerning at all. Curly is happy Jimmy is doing well, given that was not the case back on Earth. Some people theorize that Jimmy might have been a convict on Earth, and that Curly originally added him to the team to give him a fresh start at life. Curly is shown to be very supportive and a strong believer that people can overcome their pasts.
See, Curly was always someone who tried to see the good in people. Curly always saw that, and because of that, because of that fault in his lapse of judgment, he caused all of this. He caused all of this. It could have been avoided if Jimmy wasn't a nepo baby, if he didn't have Curly to bring his ass onto the ship. But the shitty thing is that Curly needed a co-pilot, and Jimmy was the only person he knew who can also co-pilot with him. So it was just like, you know, I don't have a co-pilot. I need someone, so I'm gonna have this person.
Jimmy expresses jealousy over how successful the captain is, both in his career and how others perceive him. Curly then explains he feels unsatisfied.
I feel like for me, I always try to see the good in people, but I think I'm a very good judge in character when I meet others. I am typically kind of, I would say I'm optimistic and give them the benefit of the doubt. But if they don't give me good vibes by like a certain point in the time that I've known them, I just don't interact with them. I think I'm a good judge in character when it comes to that. And usually when I just don't like someone, it's for a good reason. And I find out later that there's something, there is actually a reason that I shouldn't be liking them. So
wanting more in life than just being a good ship captain. However, he's also afraid of starting over, of abandoning his crew and the career status he's worked so hard to reach. Even if deep down, he feels the need to escape his life as it stands. Jimmy describes Curly as at the top of his ladder, relating back to the previous scene, which likely represents how the need to climb a career ladder in order to feel successful in life can also make you feel trapped or hopeless. The crash warning signs added in shows the twisting of the hierarchy Jimmy describes, again foreshadowing an upcoming event. In this way, I feel like the Blood Lake could regard Curly's anxiety about his life, or both him and Jimmy's desire to mix up the current status quo. Jimmy wants to climb higher, to have more authority, and to feel as successful as he perceives Curly to be. And Curly wants to abandon the ladder altogether, realizing that happiness does not come innate with his status. Jimmy then...
That's kind of me when I thought that, like currently right now, right? I think I'm comfortable with where I'm at in terms of being financially stable. And that's always been something that I was nervous about growing up. I felt like I would never be financially stable because I lived in such a high cost of living area and state, and I was always scared that I would end up homeless, pretty much. And so after you know, becoming somewhat successful in what I do now, and I feel safe and not like I'm gonna end up on the streets, I still kind of feel that sense of well, what now? Like, what am I gonna do now? Like, that was kind of my main goal this whole time. And now, so now that I'm there, I don't know what to do next.
Leaves as Curly receives a letter from corporate, which is impossible to decipher during the game.
Anxiety never truly leaves
We
you.
then cut
Yeah.
to another out-of-reality scene, watching a TV inside the ship's storage area. Channels include an employee instruction video, showing the corporate process an average person may follow to be successful, having a job and a family. The next channel has a black hole destroying a mass in space, perhaps foreshadowing the upcoming destruction of the crew's current lives. Or of
Sad.
some deep internal desire Curly may hold to see that destruction happen. There's a science show about the atom, talking about how everything is built on minuscule things. Then, there's some men hanging up meat in a small room.
Meat.
Foreshadowing again Curly's upcoming change in position on the ship. There's
Oh
another cartoon,
God.
now where the company supports the intake of artificial substances in order to increase the working power of its employees. Then, there's a skeleton losing its limbs and collapsing. And
Oh.
finally, an ad for mouthwash. Hey, they said the name of the game.
Stop. The whole time in the beginning of the game, it was all foreshadowing. It was all foreshadowing everything that was gonna happen.
The mouthwash is a substance which kills 99.9% of germs. Specifically, it relates to fire, an agent of destruction. The fine print beneath the ad even says that you should consult a medical professional before, while, and after using the product, which again is just mouthwash, and that the company holds no responsibility over any harm the product might cause. This is another interesting tidbit on the idea of a company not caring about the effects of its products, even in the case of the crew that they're paying to carry it. 6 days before the crash. The team
I
throws
kind of don't really get the break the news stuff. Like, that kind of came out of nowhere.
Curly a birthday party, explaining that they're only allowed one group event per year and chose Curly's day to surprise him. Being captain, he does have to make the cake himself, though. The crew seems to be in good spirits, asking Curly to give a speech, although the generally happy vibes of the scene are a tad off-put by the disarmingly huge frickin' knife on the table.
That
Curly
is
then reveals
quite
that they
a
will all
big
be
knife.
laid off after the completion of the mission, something which he was told to inform them of closer to the end, but that he felt they had a right to know.
Oh.
Swansea reacts unsurprised. Anya panics, thinking of her economic future. Daisuke remains silent, and Jimmy immediately begins throwing his anger out on Curly, blaming him for this decision which he had no control over, claiming he must be happy to be able
So
to
after the mission, they were gonna be jobless. That's
rid himself of his responsibilities
news.
without guilt. Jimmy berates every crew member one by one and refuses to acknowledge Curly's pain.
Wait, what did he say to Anya? What did he say to
Jimmy
Anya?
berates
Anya never
every
got
crew
into
member
medical school because
by
she's,
one
well,
and
let's be
refuses
real.
to acknowledge Curly's pain in this situation.
And how many employment years Swansea got left in him?
Jimmy displays his habit of forcing his own
Daisuke
security.
will be fine, mommy and daddy. You know what? I never noticed this, but he never actually said anything mean towards Daisuke or Swansea. He constantly berated Anya. He constantly dehumanized her because of what he did to her.
Into the mouths of others, describing the crew as dirt beneath Curly, showing how much he idolizes the captain's position and despises himself, villainizing Curly using his own internal dialogue. Curly cuts the birthday cake as the face value happiness of the crew breaks down. 2 days prior.
Oh, this is the scene that I talked about. This is the scene where she noticed a dead pixel and then okay.
Curly and Anya have a late night discussion in front of the lounge's moonlit sky screen. Anya points out a broken pixel on the screen, describing how it's always in the back of her mind. Curly, on the other hand, waves it by, claiming that one little issue won't break the illusion, a reference perhaps to the illusion of peace among the crew, and reveals he prefers to see the larger picture. This conversation illustrates the difference between Anya and Curly. Curly is able to look past problems in hopes of preserving a happy appearance, while Anya is forced to acknowledge the effect even a seemingly small error can have on something. She still likes the overall display though, showing her desire to be able to look past the worst aspects of something. Anya then considers the fact that there are still 8 months left on their journey, and questions why the company would...
Wait, actually, I kind of question it because, you know, when Anya asked how many days left for the mission that they have, and then Curly says like 300 something, or he says the exact amount of days needed, and then right as he says that, Anya says 8 months. It She knew already how long that they had left on the ship. She was just kind of hinting like that she wanted off already, because she was counting the days until she can finally get out. That so Oh my god, stop. I'm stop. You don't get all these. You don't get all these the first time. You don't get all these different little hints that you were supposed to pick up. It's even worse. It's even worse when you go in hindsight.
And considers the fact that there are still 8 months left on their journey, and questions why the company would put locks on the medbay.
And I should have questioned this too.
But not on.
I'm so mad at myself that I didn't get the hints that Anya was being abused by Jimmy. I should have gotten that hint by this alone. Why do you think Pony Express put a lock on the medical room door but not the sleeping quarters? Malfear, thank you for the 13 months, and Melodocious, thank you for the subby.
On the bedrooms. This fact, alongside many posters hung around the ship detailing how the crew.
You weren't really supposed to know, just like Curly. I think these are the subtle hints that she was trying to give, because she wasn't sure how to break the news or how to tell anyone at the time. And a lot of victims don't know how to tell people at all, because feeling of being ashamed or just scared to tell. So Anya was trying to tell us from the very beginning. From the moment she was stuttering and always trying to get away from Jimmy, from her mentioning the dead pixel always being in the back of her head, from her expressing that she was uncomfortable with no locks being in the sleeping quarters. There was so many hints. And we never noticed. I never noticed.
Crew would be docked for using medical supplies shows that the company cares more about protecting its financial assets than the crew itself. On my first playthrough, it was only after she asked this question that I really realized that Anya's the only woman on the ship.
Yeah,
which is pretty scary.
Stop.
Scary to think about. Curly responds that obviously it's for safety reasons, not even seeming to realize what Anya is suggesting here. This really goes to show that while Curly often has best intentions for his crew, he has a naivety about his perspective on things. One day before the crash.
Wait, now that I think about it too, sorry, I keep pausing, but I'm gonna do this anyways. Now that I think about it, you know when Anya offed herself when she took the pills and locked herself inside the medical room? She locked herself in there because she wanted herself to be safe from Jimmy even after dying. And she knew the person in that room wouldn't be able to do anything with her because he's literally a potato. Like, stop, I'm gonna cry. Oh, holy shit. Now everything is like making a lot of sense.
Curly starts out in the med bay, and it's of note that Anya has a book entitled Up or Down, The Illusion of Choice sitting on her counter. This could be representing her feelings of a lack of control in her environment and the desire to regain some. Curly discovers Anya has taken the ship's locked gun case and finds her crouched in the cockpit, clearly panicked. She reveals that she is pregnant and that Jimmy is the father. We now know that Anya was unable to protect herself without dorm locks and was assaulted, how many times is unclear, by Jimmy. Assuming she was pregnant for a period before finding out, and given the 8 remaining months of the mission, Anya would have to give birth on the ship, making the assault undeniable, or conduct an unsafe abortion.
Oh god.
Anya says she's hidden the gun case, which she could not open herself, so that Jimmy could not get to it, clearly afraid that he would use it in an attempt to remedy the situation. Curly explains that he will do anything to help her, which is funny because he would not give her the gun to protect her.
Also, you know what's crazy? You know what's crazy? They can't just kill Jimmy. They can't just lock him up. They can't just. They have to live with the fact that Jimmy has done these things. Well, I would say that there's probably no way to lock him up other than locking him in a room with locks, you know? Or if they do manage to tie him up, he's probably going to get out eventually. Also, Jimmy's really good at manipulating and really good at talking, so and the team is really susceptible to his manipulations, as we can tell. So he would probably get out of that situation either way. We just have to pretend like nothing. Well, if we put him in the cryopods, right? If anything, we're already down one cryopod. So if something happens, they only have 3 cryopods in the end. There's so many different ways that they could try to lock him up or keep him from doing anything bad, but there was like a lot of ways that he could get out of those situations. And if they killed him, his body would rot, which would give them like more susceptibility for like disease and you know, being sick and stuff. Flush him down the toilet.
Herself. And his first instinct to try to
Throw
solve
him
the
in
problem was
space?
just to talk it out with Jimmy. Interestingly, when Curly asks her who did this, Anya responds, "I told you." After which Curly understands immediately that it was Jimmy. The implication being that Curly was aware, in some degree, of the uncomfortable situation between Anya and Jimmy, yet up until this point has emphasized keeping the peace over Anya's safety. In this way, he's taken away her voice, and kind of left her at the disposal of Jimmy.
Man.
Curly says that the entire crew, including Anya, is his responsibility, and yet he refuses to do what needs to be done. He refuses to help her protect herself. He refuses to stop believing that Jimmy can be better. The day of. Anya, emotionally distressed, having told Jimmy that she was pregnant and having received an unsettling response, is bent over the medbay bed,
Man.
which seems to have a little drawer beneath it, but more on that later. She doesn't feel safe whatsoever with Jimmy on board.
Oh,
and Curly once again tries
she
to
was next to the drawer with the gun case. That's why she was there.
responsibility over the situation by just talking to Jimmy.
She was trying to get the gun.
Curly insists he will fix everything to Jimmy, who understands that his life will be ruined when they land, as he will be charged for the assaults. Jimmy has a doomsday mindset at this point, expressing desire to end everything now by crashing the ship, so that they can still be simply tragic victims of a horrible accident and nothing has to come to light. He appeals to Curly by saying that he will also lose all of his status and is just as guilty, having allowed the situation to get to this point. This conversation...
Not Curly being like, you've gotten through difficult situations before. Bitch, Jimmy just got Anya pregnant unconsensually. What do you mean? What do you mean we're gonna get through this together? No.
is so psychologically charged as Jimmy is continuing to push responsibility for something he's done onto others. Curly did fail as a captain by not truly acting on Anya's concerns, and his mindset of being able to push past any mistake prevented him from fully acknowledging the problems occurring on his ship.
Curly's just being a bro,
Jimmy is still entirely
guys.
responsible for his actions, for assaulting Anya, for being unable to control his emotions, for forcing his beliefs onto others. In this case, both parties have played a part in the grand scheme, making Curly an interesting dynamic character. He's not a hero, he's not a villain. His actions have a very human complexity to them. He shows trying to do the right thing and
Bro,
accepting
Curly
responsibility,
is a criminal
but in a
too. Yeah, they're
naive
both
way that
criminals.
ignores the overall issues. Jimbo, on the other hand, is a flaming trash rat. At this point, Jambalaya suggests crashing the ship is the solution, tells Curly he'll fix everything, and then walks into the cockpit. Curly doesn't try to stop him? Are we meant to think that Curly didn't understand what he was about to do? This moment is the most crazy to me, as it seems like the final moment of just letting it happen that Curly commits.
I still can't believe that the start of the game is us literally crashing the ship. Like, I didn't even know what the hell I was doing. I thought I had to save the ship. In reality, we were meant to crash it. And we were playing as Jimmy the whole time.
Greatest moment of weakness was allowing Jimmy to get into his head the idea of dying a hero, of not having to think about his life's meaning anymore. He hesitates. He lets Jimmy enter the cockpit, and the introduction scene of the game plays out. Jimmy sets the ship to crash into an asteroid, disables autopilot, and dooms them all.
Bruh.
Only after the warnings go off does Curly realize what he's just done, and runs into the cockpit, where his body takes the full hit of the collision.
Man.
We can note that during the hallway scene in the game's intro, when Jimmy is hallucinating being chased by the Pony Express mascot, baby crying can be heard, foreshadowing the pregnancy. And
Stop. I noticed that in the beginning too, but I didn't put it together. I totally forgot. And I think I mentioned it too. I was like, why is there a baby? I think I remember that.
Upcoming connection between the mascot and responsibility. 2 months after the crash. The crew is stranded in space, the ship now half filled with emergency foam. They sit in the lounge
and Jimmy told them that Curly crashed the ship too, and that's why they hated Curly.
Discussing whether or not they should break into the cargo room. They've withheld up until this point, since entering would dock additional pay from their final checks if they're saved. Which would really go to show how much they acknowledge that the company gives no craps about them, given that even in a survival situation, they would still dock their pay. It's interesting to point out that the Pony Express was an actual mail service that ran for only 18 months starting in the 1860s, where a train of horse riders would carry mail from America's east to west coast in only 10 days. The company preferred to hire orphans or people who wouldn't be missed given how dangerous the job was. They went bankrupt quickly following improvements in the telegraph system. They finally agree, giving their steadily dwindling supplies. Anya asks Jimmy, who has proclaimed himself to be the new captain, to get the captain's scanner from the cockpit, which is necessary to unlock the cargo room. Jimmy visits the medbay first, finding Curly, who everyone besides him believes is the one who crashed the ship. Curly's body is horribly maimed, covered in burn.
He can't even talk. He can't even say anything. He can't defend himself. But everyone thinks he crashed the ship.
He has lost his limbs, his lips, and his eyelids, removing his ability to talk.
And you know what's crazier too? Curly can't even cry because literally his tear ducts are destroyed. He has no. He doesn't even have skin anymore. But everything is just destroyed.
And immobilizing him. He has hence gone from an active player in the story to a forced viewer.
Also, if he did cry, it would burn the fuck out of him. It would hurt like hell.
Close his eyes or look away as the scenes unfold. Jimmy berates a clearly nervous Anya for being unable to feed Curly his painkillers, which he claims is her only job. He suggests
and Anya being super uncomfortable about the fact that giving Curly the painkillers and the noises that he makes is her reliving the trauma of the assault, because I guess what the sounds are that Curly is making when Jimmy's giving the painkillers is like probably sounds like what happened during the assault, or just the fact that it sounds like he's not consenting to it. So it just that really fucking is crazy.
Jess, she is a useless nurse and views her as cowardly and bothersome. His opinion of her is given to the player, as the scene is played at the beginning of the game. This skewed perspective defines the player's initial idea of Anya. Without knowing their relationship, her attempts to awkwardly suck up to Jimmy, and her need for help with the emotionally draining task of force-feeding the crying Curly painkillers,
You're so
makes
capable.
it seem like she's just a nervous person. In reality, of course, Anya is acting to avoid retaliation from her abuser, for whom she has no protection, and at the same time has been caring for her and successfully keeping Curly alive despite his—
She should have told Swansea from the beginning. Swansea would have popped Jimmy's ass so hard. He would have grabbed the axe and then freaking went to Pound Town.
Horrendous condition for 2 months now. All this while at least 2 months pregnant. Both general nausea and a personal trauma with the act of forcing another person into an unwanted act, especially the act of forced insertion, such as feeding him the pills, easily explains her behavior. Her job is both insane and hugely time-consuming. Jimmy, on the other hand, has been playing captain, which on a crashed ship means what exactly?
So true, so
Jimmy gives
true.
Curly the painkillers, then finds Anya crouching in the lounge, distressed by Curly's pained sounds. Jimmy seems to question why they're either bothering to use the medical supplies on Curly. Well, Anya explains that she believes a person is not defined by their worst moment, expressing a desire to forgive Curly for nearly killing them. Jimmy then suggests that they agreed to keep Curly alive for different reasons. His, you can imagine, is far less kind. Jimmy leaves to go talk to Swansea, who's forbidden everyone from entering the utility room, claiming that it is full of emergency foam which he has to slowly clear out. Then if anyone else
Man, he was protecting the one cryopod that was working still so that he could put Daisuke in there.
goes in there, they could cause a puncture and send them all into the void of space. I'm honestly kind of surprised how Jimmy follows Swansea's ruling on this, even when he's not actively guarding the door. Game-wise, it makes sense, but I feel it might also hint towards the fact that Jimmy holds some amount of respect for each member of the crew.
Besides Anya, have you guys noticed that? Every crew member Jimmy respected, but every time it came to Anya, he berated her and dehumanized her. Did you guys notice that?
Excluding Anya, who he tends to ignore. Jimmy retrieves the scanner and opens the cargo room. The crew is distressed to find that they are hauling exclusively mouthwash. Hit with the dark reality that over a year of their lives was going to be spent moving such an insignificant thing, and now they are likely to die for it as well.
For
Understandably
mouthwash.
makes everyone pretty upset.
For
Anya
mouthwash.
points out that the sugar content intended to make the mouthwash more palatable offsets the effectiveness of it as a disinfectant.
It's not even an effective mouthwash either. It's a shit mouthwash.
Swansea immediately notes the ethanol content and breaks his 14-year sobriety streak by drinking some, to Anya's dismay.
Also, apparently I didn't know that people who were alcoholics before, sometimes they break their sobriety with mouthwash or toothpaste. They will eat toothpaste or drink mouthwash.
Swansea offers to teach Daisuke how to drink like a man, having a somewhat strange little fatherly moment together.
And hand sanitizer, yeah.
The crew's reactions are telling of their character. Swansea is cynically accepting of the whole situation. Daisuke continues to joke lightly, still having confidence that they might be saved. And Anya is extremely distressed. I do wonder if she is simply mourning the loss of hope the unopened cargo had given her, or if she's—
Wait, I just realized when Anya was thinking about drinking the mouthwash, she was probably thinking about drinking it so that she could so that the baby wouldn't, so that she could abort the baby.
panicking over the addition of alcohol into her already perilous situation. 3 months post-crash. Jimmy wakes up in the lounge next to Daisuke, where the crew has become sleeping as the dorms have been blocked off by foam. You can hear Curly's pain sounds happening in the background. It's fun to note that Daisuke has a Game Boy and 2 weights near his bed, kind of showing his still somewhat childish interests. Looking around the lounge,
It's not
you can also find
childish.
an
I
active
still
game
play
of Sorry,
games.
which has pieces associated to each of the crew. Blue for Anya, green for Jimmy, pink for Daisuke, and yellow for Swansea. It's notable that Curly does not have a piece, which could represent the fact that he's no longer an active member of the story. There is a common social trend of disabled people being infantilized, to be viewed as a not fully matured person. Once Curly loses his agency, his ability to move and communicate, he is at the will of the rest of the crew.
Man.
Even to the player who was introduced to Curly the patient long before Curly the captain, he may be thought of as more of an object than a person.
Man.
The game even has an achievement for opening and closing Curly's mouth several times in a row, knowing that a lot of people would immediately play with his face. Jimmy feels like
I didn't get that achievement. I didn't get it, by the way. I didn't get that achievement, so I'm good.
Do whatever he wishes with
Y'all are evil people if you played with his mouth.
Curly now that he is a liability. This includes beating him, carrying him around, and force-feeding him. Curly's situation is so tragic as he transitions from being an in-charge person to at the mercy of the thoughts and actions of those around him. As far as Jimmy is concerned, Curly is a prop to be used to satisfy his own desires to save someone, to act as a good captain and a hero. Curly serves as just another example of control in the game, and what it can look like to have none. In this way, he mirrors Anya's situation, as she was also ignored and left at the mercy of Jim, and now Curly has to experience that himself.
So I think this is when Anya had told Swansea about what Jimmy did to her.
Jimmy wants to check with Anya if Curly is already at his painkillers. He ends up finding Anya and Swansea in the cockpit having a late-night discussion. Anya is crying and telling Swansea she completely understands, which I take to mean they're discussing the cryo chamber pods in the foamed-up utility room, but more on that later. Jimmy asks if Curly has been given his pills today, and he insists that he be the one to give them to him this time. Upon returning to the medbay, Jimmy expresses concern over how the rest of the crew is perceiving him, likely assuming that Anya and Swansea were discussing him. He gets upset at the stress of being in charge, then angrily thanks Curly as if it's his fault that Jimmy had to take charge. He feeds the panicked Curly the pills, the audio suggesting he possibly beats him to vent his frustration.
I hate listening
Jimmy
to
finds
that.
Daisuke passed out in the hallway, having drunken some mouthwash. Daisuke explains that his mom found him this internship, and that he joined because thus far in his life, he feels like he hasn't succeeded in anything.
He was so innocent and young and full of potential, and his mom, he's a Nepo baby that got the job because his mom.
With no goal in life, he hoped to prove something in completing the job, to make himself feel like less of a total screw-up. This reveals the sadness behind Daisuke's sunshine persona. While an upbeat voice thus far in the game, Daisuke never had a positive self-image. He cares strongly about what others think of him, which has resulted in him being easily influenced.
Man.
Even so far as to start drinking the mouthwash alongside Swansea. Daisuke is a relatable character, as someone who's just trying to get positivity out of a horrible situation, which makes it all the more sad that at this point it seems like he's also accepted that they're going to die.
Man.
He ends by saying that he hopes his mother doesn't blame herself. Jimmy finds Anya in the lounge, who herself is considering drinking the
Guys, see, if there's anything you learn from mouthwashing, don't work, because you will die.
mouthwash. She tells Jimmy that there's an additional stash of painkillers on a wall-mounted med box. However, they'd have to chop away at some foam to reach it, so they need to be very careful as to not cause a breach. Jimmy goes to retrieve the axe from Swansea, who is dancing drunkenly in front of the giant monitor. Swansea gives up the axe by swinging it into the monitor, causing a giant crack to form in the sunset display, this being another act of foreshadowing for a future event. Jimmy takes the axe and successfully reaches the med box. Anya comes over.
Wait. Do you guys remember? I don't know if I remember this correctly, but was it Swansea that called... Wasn't Swansea the one that called Daisuke a sunshine? Like he thought of him as like rays of sunshine or something? Useless ray of fucking sunshine. I don't know if this is a stretch or not, but maybe this foreshadowing that he's going to use the axe on Daisuke as he used the axe on the sunset here.
Event. Jimmy takes the axe and successfully reaches the med box. Anya comes over and gives him a big cheer for it, almost as if it was his own plan. This is likely for two reasons. A, she knows that Jimmy feeling like he is contributing decreases the chances of him becoming angry, truly at himself, but of course he puts...
Stop, Anya trying to make sure that Jimmy is happy and not trying to aggravate him so that he doesn't do anything even worse than what he did.
Pushes his stress outwards onto others. And B, to warm him up to be requested to give Curly his pills again, something that is still a major emotional struggle for Anya, who at this point is at least 5 months pregnant, so you could assume gruesome tasks are getting only more difficult for her to stomach. Jimmy blows up on her, ignoring the fact that her nausea is entirely his fault, and claiming that unlike everyone else, he is actually trying to fix the situation. He lists through a sequence of tasks he's done, totaling a stunning of 5, completed over the course of 5 months, and all of which were actually Anya's ideas. The emphasis being, of course, that he has not done anything himself, yet claims he is taking full responsibility as the new captain of the ship. Jimmy feeds Curly his pills, telling him he now realizes how hard it is to be in charge, and promises to save them both. "5 months after the crash. Daisuke wakes Jimmy, frantic as Anya and Curly are trapped inside the med bay by a large door. Anya
It's
reveals to Jimmy
time.
that she has purposely sealed the door,
It's
telling Jimmy,
time.
"You were right. I should have done this all along." We can assume whatever she's about to do is what Jimmy told her to in response to learning she was pregnant. Anya wishes she could keep believing that a person's worst moments do not define them, a saying which I believe she was trying to embrace in order to make living alongside Jimmy all this time bearable. As what else could she do in this contained space but force herself to move past what happened? But in the end she couldn't. How could anybody? She laments that this is the best decision she has ever made, and that she is going to take care of it. Her character arc began as someone who has no control over their situation, who could only try to manage how she reacted to the horrors pushed upon her. But now, she's finally able to make a decision for herself. Jimmy convinces Daisuke that they must enter the utility room despite Swansea's guarding, in order to climb into the broken ventilation shaft and crawl into the med bay, opening the door from the inside. Daisuke is hesitant out of fear of messing up again, but gives in to save his crewmates. Jimmy
Thank
pointedly
you.
says, "We can save Curly, yeah?" Interested in leaving out the saving Anya as well. Jimmy convinces Daisuke that they must drug Swansea with a spiked cocktail in order to get past him. He assures him that he will wake up perfectly fine and likely won't remember anything. One could wonder if his confidence about
And
this
you know
comes
what's
from...
crazy? You know what's crazy? They make the cocktail with the only alcohol, the only disinfectant that they have. And what's crazy is that they needed that disinfectant to possibly save Daisuke from his wounds, from getting into the vent and getting into the room with Anya. And also the fact that Jimmy already knew how to make a cocktail to knock someone out is kind of weird. It's kind of weird.
from having used this method previously. While you're in the lounge building the cocktail, if you check the sorry board, you can see that the blue pieces have been knocked over. An additional gamey note, Daisuke teleports behind the player constantly while he's making the cocktail, and this is to avoid having to animate locomotion, which requires a lot of tech support to get to look not slidey all over the floor. There's only one other case in the game in which someone is seen traveling, and it's kind of misty, just kind of fun to think about. This next scene is another out-of-reality scene between Jimmy and Curly. I wasn't exactly sure where it happened in the timeline, but the Sorry game is in a similar state, so I decided to talk on it here. Curly explains that life has ups and downs, and that the good parts are only good as a result of the bad parts being bad. Therefore, we just have to learn to appreciate the little alright moments and keep moving forward. Jimmy leaves to find a knife to cut the cake, walking through the ruined and dark ship, which has been filled with tall piles of mouthwash.
Mouthwash.
He grabs the axe, which has been lodged into the pilot seat of the bloodied cockpit.
And that's Curly's seat. The right side is Curly's seat, isn't it?
The axe is interestingly stuck in the chair that Curly sat in during their evaluation earlier. The scene feels like Jimmy's mind trying to justify his action, using Curly's own words to specifically validate the horrible things he has and will do to him. At the same time, he is under extreme pressure knowing that Curly, the very ideal of what he wanted in life, is watching everything he does. Jimmy's perception of Curly is hence stuck, with a rage-inducing despising of how he is above Jimmy, fighting a respect for Curly's
Time
opinions
to take
and
a
guilt
bite
for
out
what
of
he's done.
Curly, guys. Yummy.
Swansea, who is still drunk, refuses to let them into the utility room. Before drinking the cocktail, he tells Daisuke that he's an idiot, a failure of an engineer, and that every act of hard work he puts into the job will only result in him becoming uglier, older, and meaner. Swansea is obviously pushing his own insecurities onto Daisuke, likely insulting his naivety and good nature, while actually mourning his own lack of joy for life. At the same time, this suggests he is actually concerned that Daisuke may befall the same fate as him, and that while he's horrible at expressing himself, he wishes Dai could keep his spirit. Some people have suggested Swansea and Daisuke share some sort of a father-son bond,
They
or that Swansea
do.
relates Daisuke to the dog photo he has on his desk. Daisuke doesn't respond to the insults, seeming to have a hard time verbalizing when faced with complex negative emotions, similar to his silence at the birthday party company closure news. The only time we see his sadness otherwise is when he's drunk on mouthwash. Swansea drinks the cocktail, then Dai and Jimmy enter the utility room over a passed-out Swansea. Interestingly, his room key has a dead goose keychain on it. Dead birds in general tend to represent failure and hopelessness, white ones in particular the loss of innocence. The goose itself...
Wait, I get it. Wait, no. Guys, I remember watching it was like a documentary on TikTok. Swans, I think I don't know if it's specifically swans, but you know how his name is Swansea. Swans kill the young, their babies if they don't believe that their babies will survive in their environment. Swans kill their babies, and eventually Swansea kills Daisuke because he knows he won't survive and he's putting him out of his misery.
Self may relate to the idiom, kill the goose that lays the golden egg, which describes killing or destroying something beneficial by demanding too much of it. All of these aspects may relate to Swansea's view on Daisuke as something pure he doesn't want to get ruined. Or it could foreshadow the death of Daisuke's willingness to help, and desire to please others as a result of somebody asking too much of him. Daisuke and Jimmy enter the utility room to discover that it had never been filled with foam at all. However, only one of the 4 cryo chambers is still functioning. Entering one would freeze a person for 20 years, significantly increasing their chances of being
20
found
years
and
is
rescued.
wild, though.
Despite Jimmy's claims that Swansea was clearly trying to hide the pod so that he could use it for himself after everyone else had died, Daisuke refuses to believe that Swansea would do that, instead applauding his work in clearing out the area. I believe Swansea was protecting the pod, but with the intention of saving it for Dai.
He's so
Or perhaps the
stupid,
pregnant
but
Anya?
he's so lovable.
Given his acceptance of death and his dislike for how his own life turned out, it's unlikely he would care to steal the only one for himself. The conversation Anya and Swansea were having in the cockpit that night may very well have been Swansea explaining his plan and wanting to see Anya's opinion. Her cut-off line, if I understand completely, may have been her accepting that Dai should be the one to take the pod, as the youngest and most likely to overcome this traumatic experience. Jimmy and Daisuke look to the collapsed vent, which is clearly rife with open electrical wires, sharp metal, and tight spaces. Dai, again expressing his respect for Swansea, wishes to wait to ask him how to best go about this, but Jimmy convinces Dai that he must climb into the vent now to save the others. He appeals to Daisuke's desire to please by telling him how sure he is that he can succeed, that Swansea will be proud, that the whole crew is counting on him.
Look at his manipulation
At this
tactics
point, you may
working.
wonder, why can't Jimmy just go into the vent? The very reason for Anya to lock herself away was Jimmy after all, and so it would make perfect sense for him to climb in. Of course, it's because he's a selfish coward whose greatest desire in life is to force others to handle all his problems. So, Daisuke gets into the vent, and very quickly his pain screams echo into the room, followed by the sound of him entering the medbay and calling out to Anya.
Guys. You still want to know how he got injured? The freaking vents were... Remember the last time when we were as Jimmy and we were going through the vents? It literally had the vents all like scrapped up and like a bunch of sharp metal pieces and a bunch of like electrical wires that were unsafe to be around. He got mangled, dude. He got freaking cut the frick up.
8 hours until judgment. Via a bloody path and a lower to the ground red handprint, we see that Daisuke dragged his now punctured body through the medbay to unlock the door. Jimmy and the awakened Swansea bring him out to the lounge. Daisuke repeatedly apologizes while bleeding out, terrified of either disappointing or bothering other people.
He was apologizing. What the hell?
Swansea requests the extra disinfectant from the wall med box. However, Jimmy had to use it in order to make the drugged cocktail, and proceeds to blame Swansea for forcing Jimmy to have to have drugged him? Just one of the most insane responsibility pushes to date on Jimmy's ever-growing list. They split up to search for alternatives. At this point, the pink piece of the sorry game has been knocked over. When entering the med...
Not the small detail.
At this point...
Not the small detail.
The pink piece of the sorry game has been knocked over. When entering the medbay, Jimmy's vision of Anya on the medbay floor is completely obscured, showing his refusal to acknowledge her and what he has caused entirely. Jimmy then heads to storage.
What? I didn't even notice that. I did not even notice that. What?
Showing his refusal to acknowledge her and what he has caused entirely. Jimmy then heads to storage.
You did notice that you said something about spoilers? I don't remember.
To retrieve some mouthwash to disinfect Daisuke, and enters a guilt-ridden hallucination. He passes by Daisuke's grave, marked by one of the pink hibiscus flowers from his shirt, which are known to represent happiness, sunshine, and good luck. Jimmy follows a path of blood into a boss monster maze of storage platforms. Here, he has to quietly navigate the area, avoiding a blind beast that is only visible through the captain's scanner. The monster is a horrifying horse with an incredibly long neck, which the game describes as aimless, restless. You can't run from it. Reminiscent of the internet myth Long Horse, which warns humans of danger. In this instance, the horse is likely a metaphor for Jimmy's rejection of responsibility and feelings of guilt. Jimmy actively attempts to avoid its attention via staying silent until it moves away, mirroring his avoidance of accepting responsibility.
Okay, I didn't even
This also explains why you
think
can
of
only
it like
see it through the
that.
captain's scanner, which, being captain in itself, is supposed to represent someone who's supposed to be taking charge. The eyeless creature cannot see Jimmy if he stays silent, much like Jimmy refuses to see Anya.
This was probably the more confusing part of
Jimmy
the
retrieves
game.
the mouthwash
I didn't really
and pours it onto
understand
the
the
heavily pained Daisuke,
that horse.
who continues to apologize and proclaim that he messed up. This moment could emphasize Daisuke's insecurities, or also point out his youth, someone like a child whose first instinct is to apologize when faced with something going wrong.
there's
Once he reveals his
Swansea.
desire to have learned from Daisuke, who he admits is just a good kid trying his best, despite not being the smartest or the most hardworking. He mourns a world in which Daisuke could have helped him find joy again. Also, side note, Swansea's hands look tiny here, don't they? Everyone else's hands are humongous comparatively, especially Anya's look huge every time she lifts them up. And Swansea's got little baby hands here, just gonna freaking side note that.
Yep, good side note. Okay, I didn't even notice, but if you think about it, this is the hallway that Curly is able to look through. And he literally just watched Swansea with an axe, straight up axe Daisuke in the face. And also at this point, Anya killed herself and he couldn't do anything about it. He just watched Anya slowly die.
Swansea then swings the axe down on Daisuke's head, fulfilling the earlier foreshadowing of him destroying the sunrise on a large screen. This is the game's only example of a mercy killing, and one of many examples of
Oh, just kidding. The door's closed. Maybe he didn't see it. Or unless you can open it and keep it open.
Jimmy yelling about how he was going to fix everything despite not having done anything, nor move to stop Swansea despite a hesitation in the swing. Jimmy reveals that he knows about Swansea's plan to hog the pod for himself, which he refuses to even consider was not in fact the plan, since he himself would have absolutely done that, and Jimmy can never pass up on an opportunity to push his own concepts onto others. Swansea reveals he knows about the sexual assaults. I've seen a lot of people online claim that if Swansea had known about the assaults, he would have put an end to Jimmy right away, which is clearly not the case. He did know. Again, showcasing the complexity of people. Swansea is not a secretly heroic father figure hiding behind an illusion of alcoholism. He's a messed up guy, who in the end still acts on his own desires.
What could they have even done to Jimmy if they were trying to punish him for what he did to Aunt? What could have been done?
He didn't confront Jimmy. He didn't try to work alongside
Out the airlock, but it's already known that the Pony Express is a very, very poor company and doesn't have a lot of facilities for their actual workers. And also it's revealed that the company itself, or the way that these types of companies work, they're all not even man-made, or they're not even powered anymore. They're all robotic systems. This is one of the last freighter train thingies that have actual humans running them. It's nowadays it's supposed to be automated.
the crew for solutions over the last few months. He took out his frustration on how his own life went on Daisuke all the time, similar to how Jimmy does to Curly now. At the same time, I truly believe he was saving that pod for Daisuke. He made moves in the interest of somebody else, and deep down he hoped things could get better. It's interesting to note that after that scene, if you go back to the sorry board, Daisuke's pieces aren't knocked over anymore. Anya's still are, though. I'm not sure if this is just a game error on the developer's path, or perhaps a message that the following events aren't actually part of reality and this is still like a skewed experience, but just interesting to point out. We
I
now
feel
see
like
that
there's
Anya
some meaning
committed
to it.
suicide via overdose. Her earlier reference of doing what you said to, like,
She tried to get the gun, but instead she couldn't find a way to open the gun case and took the pills instead. Which is probably a worse fate.
likely means that Jimmy's immediate reaction to learning that she was pregnant was around the lines of, can't you just take some pills and handle it? Either way, Anya got the final say in how she died, and once again, Jimmy's problem was handled by someone else's sacrifice. Interestingly, the gun drawer built into the bed is open besides Anya. You can remember that she was kneeling in front of it the day she told Jimmy about the pregnancy. Given she was the only one who knew where she hid it, she may have taken one last crack at opening it before turning to pills. Or perhaps she left it as a final good grace to Curly, so that he had an out if he was somehow able to access it. Or even perhaps it was a message.
Even if he was gonna or able to access it, how the hell is how the hell is Curly gonna freaking pull the trigger? He's got no fingers.
To Jimmy, that Curly's life these last few months was pure agony, and that someone needed to take responsibility to end it now that she was gone. Curly begins to laugh, or possibly sob, as Jimmy takes the gun, forced to watch as it ends up in the very hands Anya hid it away from. The next series of events is a little unclear. It seems Swansea attacks Jimmy with the axe, chasing him into the cockpit at one point and bursting through the window. Somewhere around here, we enter a hallucinatory journey through the ventilation, in which the game instructs Jimmy to take responsibility for what happened to Daisuke.
Okay, so
Jimmy passes by a workstation with Daisuke and his game pieces on it.
Aww.
Daisuke's is knocked over as to represent Jimmy's direct hand at his death. Swansea's piece is noticeably absent. We see a specter of Daisuke looking up at his shadow before walking away, replaced by another hibiscus.
Flower.
In one section of the vents, Jimmy is forced to walk backwards. He once again abuses Curly's advice to keep moving forward by choosing to ignore the small collection of Daisuke's items on the ground. Even attempting to look at them while walking away forces Jimmy to start over. The distorted image which covers the screen with each failure might be Swansea's face, and we can note Swansea's character model lodged behind a specific grate. Jimmy falls to a pit besides a grave, flying past tons of poly posters which have been modified to include blood, mouthwash, and axes. Jimmy then falls into a sideways version of the medbay, where tons of axes lodged into the wall point into the vent. This could imply Swansea chased him into the vent in the last scene, forcing him to repeat the crawling travel he made Daisuke do. At one point, an axe flies through the vent wall, possibly representing the thing that Daisuke stabbed himself on, or Swansea taking a swing at the vent knowing that Jimmy was in there. Jimmy crawls until finally landing in the utility room, before a gun and a tied-up Swansea. Using the gun on Swansea triggers another out-of-reality scene.
I saw someone say that if you die to Swansea enough times in the graveyard, you get the good ending achievement,
in which the two fight each other inside of a large crypt devoted to Daisuke.
It's considered the good ending if you die to Swansea.
After successfully shooting Swansea 3 times in the head, we cut to Jimmy and him talking. This time Swansea is sat in a chair but does not appear to be tied down. Swansea explains that he was once a hopeless drunk clawing through life, until one day he foresaw his own death in an abandoned ditch and got sober. He got a wife, a job, and kids, and hoped to give them more than he had. He laments that even as he gained the good things in life, he never felt satisfied, never felt happy. In the end, he says the best days of his life were before all the grinding and the routine, when his life was dirty and rough and cruel, and the only problem he had was an empty bottle. This monologue relates to Curly's previous concerns about feeling unsatisfied in his life, even after achieving such great heights. Mouthwashing comments a lot on what makes a person happy, on the good life society pushes to people where you get a job and have a family, on the cycle of giving so much of oneself to working in order to chase that ideal.
Damn, who really? Damn, who can relate? Who can relate? You get a job, you work every day for the rest of your life, and then what? And then what?
And then, how difficult it can be to accept when that ideal doesn't make you happy. When all that work pushing to get there didn't feel worth it. And the feelings of uncertainty that come when not knowing what to do next. What can you do? Daisuke died having barely gotten started in that cycle, and Swansea ends contemplating what might have been had he never started it. Swansea wishes he could have protected Daisuke. Jimmy tells him that he's going to save them all. And then shoots Swansea.
The freaking difference to the way that Jimmy had treated Swansea and Daisuke versus Anya, even Jimmy had reservations about their deaths and the way he felt about them. But for Anya, he pretended like he never even noticed her dead body on the floor after she took the pills. That is wild.
Swansea in the head. We seem to return to reality. Swansea is dead, tied to a chair in the utility room. Strangely,
You think you hate Jimmy enough, but you don't? I do be
this
hating
might be
Jimmy.
Another example of the game showing us that
I
Jimmy
have unconditional hate for Jimmy. This man, I hate this man. I just hate him.
is an unreliable narrator. Now, Jimmy leaves the room, walking through a psychotic version of the ship's halls, in which Curly's eyes are...
Oh, that's why you guys wanted me to look down.
Now,
That's
Jimmy
what I
leaves the
didn't
room,
notice.
Walking through a
That's why you guys told me to walk back on this scene. I didn't
psychotic
even see
version
that.
of the ship's halls, in which Curly's eyes are watching him from every angle. Jimmy enters a large area with the most iconic
this is
scene
the
of
most
the game takes place.
uncomfortable scene ever.
Carly and Jimmy are the last two alive, and Jimmy is dead set on keeping it that way. In a vile act of forced survival, Jimmy repeatedly shoves a chunk of Curly's leg into his own mouth. Despite Curly's best efforts to resist, Jimmy, again ignoring the prospect of using himself as a form of nutrients, forces Curly to survive by cannibalizing himself. All so that Jimmy can feel like the hero that kept him alive.
Can you cannibalize yourself to have nutrition? Like if you were to cut off your leg and then eat it for... Can you give yourself nutrition? No, you can't. Not really. Not for long. You just bleed out. You use more than you lose from it. Oh, okay.
Jimmy then has a psychotic meltdown scene in which Curly offers to be the villain and take all the responsibility, allowing Jimmy to be the better man in the end. Jimmy claims they can both still be heroes. Curly, being the person Jimmy respected most on the ship, is the only one who which he feels willing to apologize. Not to Anya, who he assaulted, not to Daisuke, who he sent to his death, and not to Swansea, who he personally killed. He's stuck in a delusion that if he can save Curly, the only person he views as a true hero, and he can still redeem himself.
I think Jimmy wanted Curly to live because Curly cannot personally tell anyone what happened. And so people will think that Jimmy probably died a hero so that Curly can get back to civilization. I think that's why he did it.
And in thinking this, he refuses to acknowledge that Curly surely wishes to die. He selfishly keeps Curly moving so that he can pretend he fixed even a single aspect of his many previous mistakes.
I doubt Curly would be able to talk.
Jimmy breaks down in tears.
I think the whole point of Curly's design and injury is the fact that he is not able to do anything for himself.
We then cut to the vent again, in which Jimmy confronts...
Also, is this... I don't know if this was meant to be, but is this supposed to be what I think it's supposed to be? So it is. Man.
It's a giant red mass, which contains several horse fetuses. This represents Jimmy's original sin, and the one he had refused to acknowledge over the course of the entire story.
Man.
Referencing his joke about being sexually interested in horses, he now interacts with Polly, the company mascot, as the embodiment of his unborn child. He must embrace a centipede
Oh, this
amalgamation
was
of Polly,
such a creepy
coming in
scene.
contact with it instead of running.
That was scary.
He then passes through a hall of the employee licenses. Noticeably, all of Anya's are obscured by the others. This further emphasizes his rejection of what he did to her, and of her as a person. As the only one on board, he placed miles beneath himself so that he could feel important.
The freaking subtleties. The small details.
Polly, the baby incarnate, reveals Jimmy's feelings of being trapped and misunderstood as a result of the pregnancy. The idea of Anya informing the others made him feel like a victim, whose reputation was being damaged by, in his own words, one mistake. He doesn't deserve to be punished for that. He's being punished for the baby existing at all, he thinks.
What the
Through all
fuck
these
is
feelings
wrong
of
with him?
hopelessness, villainizing, stressful responsibility, Jimmy never once apologized to Anya, instead redirecting all of his guilty feelings toward Curly. At this point, he likely feels that he has to, as his mind is rejecting the idea of dying a horrible failure. Even if a deep part of him is haunted by his actions, his ability to redeem himself, to come out on top of that mistake, died alongside Anya.
I think the reason why he kills himself in the end too, because I think him putting Curly in the cryopod, he's thinking that he's saving Curly and also redeeming himself by doing that. And him killing himself in the end is like, since he already made peace with thinking he saved someone and redeemed himself, there's no chance for him to feel the guilt anymore. So he gave himself a way out and felt good about it.
And so, Curly takes her place.
Yeah, even though Curly most likely will die in the pod, or probably will die in the pod, him putting Curly in the pod as a chance of survival and perhaps like he's saved is just him thinking he redeemed himself and saving someone, and him killing himself with that thought. He probably went out thinking he was redeemed.
Jimmy takes Curly from the med bay and brings him to the lounge, where his sorry piece is the last one standing. He places him on the table, the seats occupied by the crew's corpses. They cheer him as captain, happy and clearly valuing him as they had Curly. Jimmy cuts off Curly's leg and puts it on each person's plate.
Yep, time to cut the cake, guys. Have a piece.
Then addresses him. He speaks of Curly being wealthier than them all, but being so high up that he didn't need to struggle to get food. Saying that he would rather die than be on their level. He plays out a scene in which he heroically saves everyone by sacrificing the big bad Curly, but also mercifully.
See, look, okay, look here. Swansea has his left eye still intact, and wait, is that his left eye? Wait, hold on.
Wishes to save
Let me look
him
closer.
As well.
Wait, do they both have their left eye? They both have their left eye.
The ultimate hero's fantasy, in which the underdog Jimmy saves the day. Jimmy places Curly into the one functioning cryopod. He feels satisfaction in thinking he has made it up to Curly, the one person he truly looks up to, and the one person who was unable to tell him how absolutely insane he is, how much he's fucked up every aspect of the story. There is no happy ending, or grand comeuppance. Jimmy ends the story believing he has won forgiveness, that he has fixed the problem. Curly is serving as his mouthwash, a superficial remedy he used to cover up everything he doesn't want to accept about himself. He turns on the cryopod and walks off screen. He shoots himself and
Also,
dies.
you know what's crazy?
Curly is
You know what's crazy? He didn't even know that the cryopod would even work before he killed himself. The cryopod only starts doing its thing after he dies. It only started doing all that misty shit and freezing the inside after he died. He didn't even care what happened to Curly. He was just like, this is going to save you. And I know it's going to save you. I redeemed myself. Boom. And then he kills himself. And then, oh my God.
slowly frozen, made to wait the next 20 years to possibly be forced again into the living hell that is his existence. In the end, the mouthwash represents the company's priorities of profit over people. Even that 0.1% of germs or a single pixel can corrupt an entire image should it continue to spiral. Even one mistake can become the entirety of a person. Mouthwashing is such an interesting game because none of its characters are perfect. It's just
Sometimes the worst people in life are the winners. I believe it. Because it's the worst people that are so good at getting what they want. And the good people are either people pleasers or know that sometimes getting what they want isn't the best for everyone.
jumbled method of presenting scenes makes the viewer question their initial assumption about what's going on. It's not often we get to play the villain. The game's commentary on feeling helpless when the prescribed steps to happiness don't work, it's pretty hard, especially in a society where work seems to take up so much of our lives. I'm sure there's a ton more in the game that fans will be reading into for quite a while. Thanks for joining me on this little analysis. If you enjoyed, check out my original playthrough of Mouthwashing, or give a like, comment, or subscribe.
Peak cinema, absolute masterpiece, 10 out of 10, perfect, Kompeki. Holy schmoly. I need to call the police for like a wellness check on the devs. Actually, I need to like make a call or something to make sure that they're okay. Like, who even creates this game and is mentally sane? Who even creates something so traumatizing and they're okay and happy? Are the devs okay? Yeah, this had more impact than Silent Hill. I enjoyed this more than Silent Hill. It was short and concise, not concise. It was short and very detailed and made you like characters, and they were relatable, and oh God, it was just mwah, chef's kiss. Mwah. You know, now that I think about it though, Junji Ito is a perfectly fine human being too. Or I don't even know if that's her name. The person that created Junji Ito, I don't even know. It felt very human. It felt very real. It felt like real life problems that people can relate to or may have experienced. Even though it's about a story that takes place in space, it had real life issues, which was very good at catching people's attention and having them invested in the plot. This was, oh God, I don't even, guys. I need this game to win an award. I need it. I need it to be nominated for something. I know it won't get nominated, but it deserves so much. I need these devs to get every single penny that they need and more to create more. Have you played Signalis? No, but I heard that Signalis is pretty sad and has lesbians. Signalis is confusing. I think I remember watching Juniper play a little bit of it. You'd love Signalis. Oh god, I'd be so down. I need the devs to make banks so they can pay off their therapy bills. Yeah, I need these devs to make enough money so that they could get medicated. Because what the heck was this? They're not okay. They're probably in the trenches at the moment. How do you just come up with this? How do you just write this and be sane and mentally fine? They cooked in the most concerning way. Literally. Maybe the success of the game is saving them. I have no doubt that all of this recognition from like all the TikToks and YouTube videos and people playing the game, that they're making a lot of money, but I need them to make more money so that they could make more games and hire more staff and could you imagine this game voice acted too? Could you imagine like Poggers voice acting for a game like this? Or a live action? Holy. Or an animation? Oh god, like a short little film, like a short little like animated film of this game. That'd be too powerful for this world. Live action Class of '09. Aren't they doing a live action though? I thought Class of '09 is getting a film. An anime. Oh yeah, they're getting an anime. This could easily be a miniseries. Dude, you know, Love, Death, and Robots? They should make an episode that is inspired by Mouthwashing. Love, Death, and Robots, or what is that other Netflix series that is similar to Love, Death, and Robots? Was it Black Mirror? Black Mirror should make an episode that's like similar to Mouthwashing.